Captain trapped a stranger in his office at 3 a.m. But he's a secret millionaire. The clock struck 3, its chime cutting through the eerie silence of the captain's office like a knife. Shadows danced across the walls, twisted shapes that whispered secrets of the night. Outside, the city was asleep, but inside, chaos reigned. Captain James Harrington stood frozen, breath hitched in his throat, eyes wide with disbelief. In front of him was a stranger, a mysterious figure clad in dark attire, his face obscured by a hood. Who was he? What did he want? A chill crawled up James's spine. This wasn't he just a stranger, there was something about him, an electric energy in the air, a feeling that something monumental was unfolding. The wallpaper, once a muted shade of blue, seemed to pulse with life as the tension thickened. Each heartbeat echoed in the stillness, merging with the sound of the distant sirens, turning the office into a confinement chamber of suspense. Then, a flicker. The stranger lifted his head just enough for the light to catch a glint of gold, a lavish cufflink, twinkling like a star against the backdrop of midnight. James's mind raced. A wealthy man brought low by a choice, or maybe an escapee from a high-society gala gone wrong? Each second felt like an eternity, and his gut twisted at the thought. Why was he here, now, and what dark secret did he carry? The air shifted suddenly, thick with uncertainty. "You don't want to do this," the stranger murmured, voice low but steady, resonating with an authority that sent an unfamiliar shiver rippling through James's chest. He felt a lump form in his throat. The raw intensity between them was almost unbearable, as if the very fabric of reality was about to warp. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue." Suddenly, the stranger moved, a fluid motion, eyes locked onto the captain with an intensity that could burn through steel. "It's not what you think," he blurted, desperation seeping through his composure. James's heart raced. What did that mean? Panic simmered just below the surface as the weight of the moment bore down on him like a heavy fog. But it all got tangled in a web of clues and intrigue. This man was hiding something monumental. The city outside remained blissfully unaware of the brewing storm within those four walls. Who was this stranger? And how was he connected to a web of secrets waiting to unravel? The room felt smaller by the second, secrets pressing in all around. James wasn't just facing a man, he was confronting a revelation that could turn his world upside down. As the captain took a cautious step forward, the air crackled with uncertainty. What was about to unfold would change everything he ever thought he knew. Would he dare to uncover the truth? Or would he remain trapped, just like the hourglass that insisted time was slipping away? The silence between them grew heavy, an invisible weight pressing against James's chest. The stranger was clearly agitated, muscles coiled tight like a spring. "You have to understand," he said, voice barely above a whisper, "there are people after me. Dangerous people." James swallowed hard. The words hung in the air, unfurling a tangle of questions. Why here? Why now? His instincts screamed for him to grab the phone and call for backup, but something rooted him in place. Was he about to send the wrong man to his demise? "Who are you?" James demanded, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "What did you do?" "More than you'll ever know," the stranger replied, stepping closer, the glint of that cufflink sharper under the flickering lights. "But if you let me explain, you might just save us both." The flicker of hope in the stranger's eye was magnetic, drawing James in. Terrible secrets buried beneath the lives of the affluent could spill out at any moment, and he felt trapped between duty and curiosity. "Why should I trust you?" "Because I have something you need," the stranger insisted, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "Information that could unravel corruption at the highest levels." "Corruption?" The word struck a chord within James. He had joined the force to serve and protect, to bring accountability and justice. If there was a chance this man might hold a key to a bigger conspiracy, he couldn't just walk away. But there was that nagging feeling, the hairs on his neck standing on end. What do you mean unravel? Evidence, the stranger said, the passion igniting his tone, hands trembling with urgency. Proof of a scandal that reaches deep into the police department and beyond. I was close to exposing it when they found out. James felt a cold sweat break on his forehead. Could this really be happening? And now you're here? Yes. But we don't have much time, he replied, glancing at the office door as if he expected it to burst open. They'll come for me for us. You need to decide. Will you help me? Help him? The thought churned in James's gut. Images flashed, headlines splashed across newspapers, careers ruined, lives shattered. But the looming risk lingered heavily on his mind. If they were exposed now, it could mean the end of everything he'd ever fought for. Do you have a plan? James asked, his heart racing. It'll only take a moment to show you, the stranger said, reaching into his pocket. James's instincts flared, every warning sign told him to stop. Then, with a swift motion, the stranger pulled out a small flash drive and extended it towards James. Everything you need is on here. But you have to protect it. They won't stop until it's destroyed. The world outside continued on, oblivious to the tension building inside those four walls. James's eyes flicked to the door again, and he had to make a decision. Would he betray everything he stood for, risking his career and life for a man he barely knew? Captain. A voice called from the hallway, cutting through their fragile moment. James's breath quickened. The door was rattling. Hide it. He hissed, grabbing the flash drive just before there was a loud bang against the door. The stranger's eyes widened with panic, and time suddenly rushed forward. Would he stand by this stranger's side or flee? In that instant, everything was on the line. As the door creaked open, a dark silhouette appeared, revealing not just danger, but the unexpected. Drop it. The figure barked, and James's heart sank. The night had only just begun, and the true depth of this conspiracy was about to unravel. Could he trust the man standing before him? The moment teetered on the edge of chaos, and James knew there was no turning back. James's heart thundered in his chest, drowning out the voice of the intruder standing in the doorframe. The dim light flickered ominously, casting long shadows that twisted the man's features into something nightmarish. Captain, I said drop it. He pressed, eyes narrowing as he took a menacing step forward. The glint of a weapon peeking from beneath his jacket made every instinct in James scream to act. He'd see the badge and the gun for too long not to recognize an officer on edge, even if this one was clearly the enemy. Back off. James shouted, shoving the stranger behind him. The flash drive clenched tightly in his fist felt like the only tether to whatever hope existed in that moment. The stranger's breath quickened, urgency bleeding into his wide eyes. Think about what you're doing. He hissed, desperation clawing his voice. James's mind raced. Could this man be lying? Was he an ally or enemy? A breath later, the air thickened with tension as he faced the intruder, adrenaline coursing like fire through his veins. What do you want? He demanded, fighting to control the quiver in his voice. Just the drive, Captain. Simple as that, the figure replied, a cold smile stretching across his lips. The flash drive or your life. As if on cue, the door swung wide, slamming against the wall, revealing a full squad of officers behind the intruder. The sight knocked the wind out of James. This was the kind of setup that could flatten careers and lives in one fell swoop. Stand down. This is a shut it, James. Shouted one of his colleagues, who raised his weapon. The betrayal felt like a knife twisting in his gut. Every sense recoiled. The stranger he was supposed to decide whether to trust or turn in had become the smallest needle in a haystack of potential disaster. "You don't understand this isn't what it seems," he pleaded, voice straining with urgency. "Isn't it?" The ringleader of the intruder unit shot back, glaring at James. "You risk your life for a criminal? This lunges beyond reckless, it's treason." Chaos erupted. Everyone moved at once, shouts, movements, weapons drawn, and the air filled with the metallic scent of gun oil that had the potential to mix with something much worse. In that split second, everything became clear. James felt the weight of the decision he hadn't even fully realized he had made. His instincts kicked in, igniting him with clarity. "Get down." He hurled himself over the stranger's body just as shots rang out. The room was alive with chaos, punctuated by shouts and desperate gasps. Time seemed to crawl as bullets ricocheted, striking furniture. James rolled, adrenaline pumping through his veins like electricity. "Follow me." He grabbed the bewildered stranger by the collar, hoisting him to his feet as he dashed for cover. The sounds of chaos, shattered glass, splintering wood surrounded them like a cacophony of destruction. Outside the office, the hallway blurred into a nightmare. James could hear the distant hum of panic echoing throughout the police station. Voices screamed in the background, but all he heard was his own pulse, eerily loud in his ears. "We need to get out of here," he shouted, pushing the stranger ahead of him. "Do you have a back way? A plan? Just trust me." The stranger gasped, confusion and resolve battling in his eyes as he led the way, deeper into the shadows of the station. With each step, they could hear the chaos behind them building to a fever pitch. Despite the ferocity of it all, James fought against a rising urge to look back. To see what had been lost. But one thought anchored him to belief: this was far bigger than he could ever expected. And as they turned a corner, James caught the sharp glint of hope nestled among the chaos, a flash that could either lead them to freedom or straight into the hands of their pursuers. "Where does this lead?" he demanded, grounding himself in the moment. "An exit if we can make it," the stranger replied, fear mingling with determination in his voice. With every heartbeat, they raced against the clock, but an unsettling thought crept into the back of James's mind: even if they escaped, who could he trust when all of this was over? They rushed through the narrow corridor, the fluorescent lights overhead flickering as if they were as panicked as James felt. Each dragging step brought them closer to the unknown, fear and desperation wrapping around him, squeezing like a vice. The stranger led the way, glancing back frequently, his expression a mix of fear and resolve, but James couldn't shake his doubt. "Do you even know where we're going?" James shot out, the tension in his voice slicing through the chaos. "Trust me," the stranger repeated, urgency lacing his words as they veered into a side hallway. The atmosphere buzzed with a frantic energy, echoes of gunfire still ringing through the air like a tragic song. They dashed past old desks piled high with abandoned case files, a stark reminder of the mundane police work that had suddenly transformed into a fight for survival. James's eyes scanned the rooms, searching for an opening, a way to escape this nightmare. He could hear the commotion growing behind them, angry shouts, the clattering of boots, and the unmistakable sound of radio chatter. Each sound felt like ice sinking into his veins. Suddenly, the stranger slipped into an office, waving James inside. With no time to hesitate, James followed, slamming the door shut behind them. The refuge was cramped and suffocating. Papers scattered across the floor, evidence of the frantic pace that had consumed the building hours before. "Okay, what's the plan?" James whispered, his heart racing as he fought to stay calm. Just give me a moment." The stranger knelt, rummaging through a drawer filled with old pens and outdated notes. Panic flickered across his face, but then he straightened, a faint spark of hope igniting in his eyes. "I know where we can get out. Just we need to stay quiet." The tension hung thick as they both froze, listening to the footsteps outside. The patrols were searching, each thud against the floor sending chills racing through James. It felt like they were in a hunted animal's lair. "Did you see the others?" James finally asked, voice low. "Are they okay?" "Others?" The stranger frowned. "I don't know what you mean, those cops out there aren't my friends." Something twisted in James's gut at that revelation. "So, you're saying you're not?" "No. I'm not the enemy," he interjected. "But I can't explain everything now. I need to get out. And you need to decide, will you help me, or will you let them catch you?" Caught between trust and survival, James felt the weight of the situation bore down on him. Just then, a loud crash followed by shouts erupted from the hallway, jolting them both into action. "They're getting closer," James urged. "What's the exit?" "Through here," the stranger said, pointing to a fire escape door at the rear of the office. "But you have to be quiet. They can't know we're here." They moved cautiously, sliding toward the door as shadows flitted past outside. James pressed his ear against the cold metal, listening to the crazed chaos echoing throughout the building. Just as the stranger reached for the handle, the door suddenly burst open. James barely had a moment to turn around, his heart stopping at the sight of two officers standing wide-eyed in the doorway, guns drawn. "Hands in the air!" one of them shouted. In a heartbeat, James realized all their plans had fallen apart. The fire escape felt miles away, but within the flicker of impending disaster, something shifted in the stranger's demeanor. "Listen to me," he shouted, stepping forward. "This isn't what it seems." James struggled to comprehend what was happening. The air crackled with tension again, wrapping around him, leaving no room for more error. Would he take a chance on the stranger or surrender to the growing chaos? Before he could decide, the unexpected happened. The stranger pulled something from his pocket and tossed it to the ground, an object that emitted a bright flash, blinding everyone in its wake. What had he just unleashed, and would it be enough to give them the edge they desperately needed? Light burst into the small office, exploding in a shower of colors that chased away the shadows. James instinctively raised his arms to shield his eyes, feeling a familiar tightness in his chest as panic welled up again. The officers in the doorway stumbled back, their shouts turning into disoriented yelps. "Go, now!" the stranger shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos like a knife. James didn't think twice. He surged forward, slipping past the stunned police officers who were trying to process the blinding light. He felt the stranger close behind him, the urgency of their flight igniting a fierce determination. They darted into the hallway, adrenaline propelling them forward. The fluorescent lights continued to flicker, casting erratic shadows that danced along the walls, making the building feel alive and hostile. "Where's the exit?" James panted, adrenaline coursing through him as the pounding of his heart roared in his ears. "Third floor stairwell. We can get out there." The stranger gasped, eyes darting as he led the way. They turned a sharp corner, skidding to a halt at a staircase. James hesitated, glancing back down the corridor. He could hear the officers regaining their footing, shouting into radios, echoing commands to contain the situation. "Now!" the stranger urged, and they climbed, each step heavy with the weight of their fear. The third floor landing offered a brief moment of respite, but James could feel the tension creeping back. The sounds below grew louder, a mix of footsteps, shouts, and the ominous threat of weapons being readied. "Which way?" James asked, the question spilling out hurriedly between breaths. "Back to the left, there's a fire escape," the stranger said, pulling James toward a doorway. But just as they were about to rush through, an officer appeared at the end of the hall, gun drawn and ready. "Stop!" the officer bellowed. "You're surrounded." James felt his breath hitch. He glanced at the stranger, whose face had gone pale, a mix of fear and desperation etched into his features. "Keep moving!" the stranger shouted. In that instant, James remembered the events of the last few hours, his normal life shattered, thrust into a world where trust was a foreign concept. Was this stranger truly an ally, or had he just swapped one peril for another? Turn back. The officer yelled again, his voice reverberating in the tight space. The stranger, seeing no alternative, lunged forward, diving toward the officer just as James did the same. The two collided, a chaotic flurry of arms and legs. James's heart raced as he felt the heat of the struggle, the clatter of shoes and the alarmed shouts echoing in his ears. "Get off me!" the officer shouted, throwing the stranger back. James's instincts kicked in. He grabbed a nearby pen from the ground, the weight of it feeling strangely significant in his hand. With a sudden burst of courage, he charged. "Let him go!" he yelled, brandishing the pen like a weapon. The officer froze, eyes wide, shock registering for a fleeting moment. It was a foolish move, but fear drove James onward. "James!" the stranger shouted from the floor, struggling to get to his feet. "Now!" In that split second, James's resolve solidified. The sight of the chaos, the fear, the pursuit, the uncertain alliances clouded his mind. He couldn't go back. He wouldn't. He bolted toward the other end, but the officer regained a grip on his composure and shot a warning into the air. "I'll shoot." James skidded to a stop, breathless and shaking, facing a wall of desperation. "James, this way!" the stranger called again, grasping the edge of a door that led to an emergency exit. But as he pushed open the door, alarms erupted, blaring through the corridor, turning chaos into pandemonium. "Go! Get out!" But before James could step through, he turned back, the weight of the choice heavy. What kind of ally was this stranger? On the verge of understanding this tangled web of danger, he hesitated. Would he leap into the unknown with a person he barely knew, or would he succumb to the fear of the officers waiting just behind them? As James stood there, heart pounding like a drum, the echo of sirens began to rise. This was over yet, what awaited him on the other side, and would he survive it? The blaring alarms seemed to fill the corridor, drowning out the world. James could barely think. He felt the heat rising in his chest, the panic clawing at his throat. The desperate shouts of officers echoed in his ears, a cacophony of threats. "James! Move!" The stranger's voice broke through like a lifeline. James spun around, heart racing, and lunged through the door into the alleyway. Cool night air hit him like a wave, a stark contrast to the chaos left behind. For a moment, he gasped, dizzy with adrenaline and confusion. "Run!" the stranger yelled, pulling James into motion again. They bolted down the dark alley, shadows shifting as the orange glow of streetlights flickered around them. "Who are you?" James managed to ask, between breaths. "No time to explain," the stranger snapped, glancing over his shoulder. "Just trust me." Trust. The word felt heavy. Images of police officers, guns drawn, filled his mind. Could he trust this man who had pulled him into this nightmare? But there was no time to question it. They were being hunted now. With every turn they took, the echoes of shouting continued to taunt them, chasing them like shadows. They reached a busy street, and James could see a flickering neon sign in the distance, the promise of anonymity in the throngs of nightlife. "Follow me," the stranger urged, weaving through the crowd. James felt the pull of desperation, of survival, tugging at him. The noise of the bar crowd muffled the alarms, their laughter and clinking glasses creating a brief safe haven. He slipped in behind the stranger, breathless, heart pounding as they pushed through the bodies. "Where are we going?" James shouted over the din. The stranger paused, scanning the room with intense eyes. "There's a back door. We can lose them in the alley behind." Suddenly, the doors of the bar swung open, and two officers burst in, eyes scanning the crowd. Panic surged in James's chest. He felt caught, a deer in headlights. "Now!" the stranger shouted, tugging at his sleeve. They ducked through a narrow, dimly lit passageway that led to a small back exit. What happens if we get caught? An avalanche of what-ifs flooded his mind, but the stranger's grip was firm, pushing him forward. Once outside, they emerged into an alleyway that was both dark and unfamiliar. James's breath came in rapid bursts as he leaned against the cool brick wall, trying to catch his breath. The stranger turned to him. "You're still with me? Are you okay?" I don't know. What do you want from me?" A flicker of conflict crossed the stranger's face. "I need your help." James echoed incredulously, still trying to process everything. "Why me? I don't even know you." "Because you're the only one who can save us both." The stranger's voice held a fierce urgency, compelling heart-pounding fear. Before James could ask what he meant, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed down the alley. They were closing in. He could hear the muttered orders of the officers. Their escape window was shrinking fast. "Listen to me." The stranger's eyes locked with his, full of intensity. "You have to trust me. If we don't get out of here, we're both going to end up in a world of pain we can't escape." James felt the weight of those words long before he understood their meaning. This was more than just a police chase. What had he stumbled into? "Which way?" he asked, the urgency finally stripping away his hesitation. "Follow me," the stranger shouted, darting toward a dumpster at the edge of the alley. James followed blindly, desperation clawing at him as he glanced back to see figures blocking the entrance they had escaped from. A loud crash followed, and the metallic clang of something hitting pavement echoed ominously. It sent shivers down James's spine. What was that? He gasped, panic bubbling to the surface again. "Just keep running." As they squeezed behind the dumpster, James's mind raced. What awaited them on the other side of all this? Beyond the shelter, the night lay ahead, full of uncertainties, danger, and uncharted paths. The stakes were higher than ever. Would he be able to navigate this maze? Or had he crossed into a world where there was no turning back? With the sound of footsteps closing in, the whisper of adrenaline urged him to dive headfirst into the unknown. Would they escape the chaos, or had they just run straight into a trap far worse? The pungent smell of garbage surrounded them, a stark reminder of the reality they were now steeped in. James pressed his back against the cold metal of the dumpster, heart thundering in his chest, listening as the footsteps drew nearer. He glanced at the stranger, whose face was a mask of determination, searching for any trace of doubt. "Why do you need me?" James whispered, his voice barely audible over the clamor. The stranger's expression hardened. "I can't do this alone," he replied, urgent but clipped. "They're not just cops. They're after something much bigger than either of us." James swallowed hard, the lump in his throat constricting his voice. "What could they possibly want from us?" "Answers," the stranger said, eyes flickering with urgency. "And if they have to drag you in kicking and screaming, that's exactly what they'll do. So much for a quiet night out." His mind reeled with the implications. He had gone from sipping a drink at the bar to hiding from ruthless men in a matter of moments. A voice emerged from the shadows, booming and commanding. "I know you're in there. Come out with your hands up." James's stomach twisted in knots. He felt the urge to bolt, running like a wild animal trapped in a corner. "We have to keep moving," the stranger murmured, suddenly moving toward the alley's end where the shadows melded into darkness. Nervous energy coursed through James as he forced himself to follow. He had no idea this night would unravel into something unfathomable. They reached the edge of the alley, glimpsing the street ahead. It was deceptively innocent cars thrumming by, people obliviously strolling with drinks and laughter. "Any bright ideas?" James asked, every instinct telling him they would be spotted in an instant. "There's an underground tunnel that runs beneath the city," the stranger replied swiftly, scanning the area for cops. "If we can get to the entrance before they catch up, we might just slip past them." An underground tunnel? The idea felt outrageous, but anything sounded better than facing the officers above. "Where?" "Follow me," he said, darting to the right into another narrow passage. They moved quickly, the high walls closing in on either side. Sweat dripped down James's forehead as they raced, their footsteps sounding too loud amid the raised voices above. Every corner felt like running straight into a dead end, but the stranger maintained his pace, confidence radiating off him. Suddenly, without warning, a blaring horn echoed from behind. The sound wrapped around James like a noose, tightening his chest. "Faster!" the stranger urged. Panic surged in James's veins. The tunnel's entrance was only a few yards away now, but the plaintive wails of sirens grew louder, a reminder that time was running out. Almost there. They rounded a corner, and there it was, a rusty metal door, half hidden beneath an overgrown vine. With a surge of adrenaline, James pushed against it, the rusted hinges groaning loudly. "Get in!" the stranger urged, shoving James inside. As the door flung open, they stumbled into the dimly lit tunnel, the air thick with moisture and something metallic. "Close it! Quick!" James turned just in time to see two officers rounding the corner. He slammed the door shut, the echo of their voices muffled by the metal that now separated them from the danger outside. Breathing heavily, he turned back to the stranger, who seemed to revel in the momentary safety. "What next?" James asked, his voice trembling slightly. The stranger grinned, but it was laced with anxiety. "Now, we wait, and find out what they've got planned." As they stood in the dim light, a harsh flickering from a distant bulb illuminated the walls, casting eerie shadows, but just as James prepared to ask more questions, the low grumble of footsteps echoed within the tunnel, sending chills racing down his spine. "Who else is down here?" he stammered, eyes wide, heart racing again. The stranger's face paled. "I didn't think anyone would be." Suddenly, a pair of glowing eyes appeared in the darkness ahead, glaring menacingly. James braced himself, unsure of what was lurking in these depths. Was this hell or salvation? The eyes, like twin stars in the blackness, drew closer. They weren't just reflective, they were alive and hungry. James felt the cold sweat trickle down his back as the dim bulb overhead flickered. "Stay close," the stranger hissed, his voice low and urgent. With every step, the tension thickened. James moved, keeping his body flush against the damp tunnel wall. The shadows shifted, twisting as something moved just ahead. "What is it?" he managed to whisper, panic clawing at his throat. "I don't know." The stranger's voice hung heavily as he squinted into the dark, jaw clenched tight. Then they heard it. A low growl emanated from the shadows, rumbling like thunder. "Is it a dog?" James ventured, though deep down, he doubted it. The sound was too primal, too menacing. No dog makes that kind of sound. Before they could react, a guttural snarl erupted. The figure lunged forward, illuminated briefly by the flickering light, a grotesque, hunched creature, its sharp teeth glinting in the darkness. James's heart leapt into his throat. "Run!" The stranger's command cut through the air. They dashed down the tunnel, adrenaline propelling them forward as the creature howled behind them. James stumbled, nearly falling over himself, panic flooding his senses. The pungent scent of mildew filled his nostrils, mixed with something metallic that made him want to gag. "It's gaining on us!" he shouted, fear tinging every syllable. "Turn left up ahead." They rounded a bend, with the echoing growls trailing behind them. The tunnel seemed to stretch endlessly, but a flicker of hope ignited within James. There had to be an exit somewhere. "Where does this tunnel lead?" he begged, trying to keep pace. "To a forgotten part of the city. An old subway line, I think. It's secluded." The stranger's eyes darted around. "If we can get there, we might lose it. Just keep running." James gasped, his lungs burning. The creature's breath was hot on their heels, a rancid reminder of how close danger lurked. But as they sprinted, the lights above began to flicker more violently, casting erratic shadows that took form only to vanish in an instant. James risked a glance back. The eyes were still there, relentless, glimmering with ferocity. They reached a crossroads in the tunnel, one path spiraling down into darkness, the other littered with debris. The screams of a distant train echoed, mingling with their heavy breaths. Down! The stranger lunged toward the littered route. We need to get below ground. James followed blindly, feet pounding against the asphalt. The sound of the creature now felt like a rhythm, a sinister pulse driving him forward. Faster! The stranger urged, their urgency boiling into panic. The tunnel began to slope downward, and just as James felt hope creeping in, a loud crash reverberated behind them. The creature was gaining speed, its growl morphing into a desperate howl. Tripping and skidding down the slope, James struggled to maintain his footing. Just as he reached the bottom, he glanced back and saw the creature charging. It was closer now, its form more defined, a monstrous shadow with claws that scraped the tunnel walls. Into the subway. The stranger pointed to a door on the left, rusty and half open, revealing a faint glimmer of light. They barreled through the door just as the creature lunged. Inside the subway station, silence met them, but it was not comforting. The air stilled, the only sound was the echo of their breathing as they found themselves in a cavernous chamber, illuminated by sporadic lights and decorated with long-abandoned turnstiles. What now? James's voice trembled, chest heaving with fear. The stranger paused, scanning the dark corners of the station. We have to move again. There's a train we can take, but it's complicated. If we stay here too long. Before he could finish, a deafening roar erupted from the tunnel behind them. What is that? James felt ice seep into his veins. It's not just a creature, it's guarding something. The stranger's eyes widened in realization. What lay beneath the city was far more than they had ever imagined. I need answers, James said, a new determination settling in. We both do. But before they could formulate a plan, the ground beneath them trembled, sending a shuddering quake through the subway station. Fissures split the walls. Get ready! The stranger shouted, grit and fear mingling on his face. With an ear-splitting roar, the tunnel erupted, and unholy shrieks filled the air, hinting at the horrors yet to be unearthed. The truth was rising, but at what cost? In this dark underbelly, what monstrous secrets would they unveil? The ground shuddered violently, dust cascading down from the cracked ceiling. James's heart raced as he frantically searched for an escape route, every instinct screaming at him to flee. The shadows warped and twisted around him, like the hands of 1,000 ghosts reaching out from the darkness. Over there! The stranger shouted, pointing towards a rusted stairway that wound upward. The flickering lights overhead cast erratic beams that barely pierced the darkness, creating an almost dreamlike disorienting effect. Is it safe? James bit out, panic making his throat tight. We don't have a choice. With a determined shove, the stranger began climbing. James followed, his legs screaming with each step. The echo from the beast behind them was like a thunderclap, a reminder that time was slipping away. A low growl echoed, more guttural and advanced than before. James's heart raced. There was no more denying that whatever was pursuing them wasn't just a creature, it was a hunter, and they were its prey. The old metal stairs creaked ominously under their weight, each step threatening to collapse. As they neared the top, James caught a glimpse of the creature's silhouette against the light filtering through the small window at the station's entrance, and it struck him with a visceral fear. The monster appeared larger, more defined, its eyes glowing with a feral intelligence. It shifted, muscles rippling beneath leathery skin like a panther waiting to pounce. They finally reached the landing, and the stranger swung open a door. The scent of rust and decay hit them like a tidal wave, but the rush of air was oddly refreshing compared to the stifling tunnel below. They stumbled into an office littered with abandoned papers and shattered furniture. This is what the creature was guarding, the stranger breathed, eyes darting across the room. Whatever's here, it's important. James scanned the dusty room. Old maps, gnarly roots, something vibrating faintly on a monitor. What is this? He wondered aloud. A scratching sound echoed from the door they had just entered, and the stranger's eyes went wide. We need to hide. I don't know how long before it finds us. They ducked behind an overturned desk, the heavy thud of the creature's footsteps getting louder as it burst through the door, filling the room with its rancid breath. It sniffed the air, letting out a series of chilling growls that vibrated deep in James's chest. "Stay quiet," the stranger whispered urgently, fingers twitching near a hidden knife in his pocket. The creature prowled the room, searching for any trace of them. It scratched at the furniture, teeth clicking against the metal, an echo of primal fury reverberating in the silence. James held his breath, his body trembled as he fought the urge to scream. Then the monitor lit up, a sequence of numbers flashing unnervingly bright. The creature halted, head snapping to the source of the light, drawn in by an unknown force. "It's got to be connected somehow," the stranger uttered, his voice trembling with realization. Those numbers, they could be a code, a way to control it. But even as he spoke, the creature turned back, sensing their presence once more. It opened its maw, revealing rows of sharp, glistening teeth. Without thinking, James reached for the knife the stranger had shown, adrenaline mixed with an almost desperate resolve. What if we can't control it? What if it's too late? This is our shot. The stranger whispered fiercely. We either find a way to stop it, or we're done for. The creature lunged forward, and there was no more time to think. With a primal roar, everything shattered. And in the chaos, the true horror of their predicament unfolded. What monstrous power lay behind the codes they unearthed, and could they wield it to survive? Suddenly, from the corner of his eye, James noticed something glinting beneath the desk, a flash of metal that promised more than just survival. But was he ready to face what came next? The sound of chaos blasted through the dilapidated office as the creature thrashed about, seeking its prey. In a moment of pure instinct, James lunged for the glint beneath the desk, fingers brushing against something cold and metallic, a handgun, its weight a shock against his palm. He gripped it tightly, the heaviness grounding him in a sea of panic. "Grab that!" he hissed to the stranger, who had just pulled the knife from his pocket, ready for a confrontation. "We need a plan now." The stranger met his gaze, a flicker of understanding exchanging between them. Danger lurked in every corner, and as the creature unleashed another horrific roar, they both knew they had little time before it would find them. "On three," the stranger said, steadying his breath. James nodded, adrenaline coursing through him. As if some primal instinct had kicked in, they positioned themselves, ready to confront their monstrous foe. 1, 2. The door burst open again, sending splinters flying, as the creature lunged, powerful jaws snapping just inches from their faces. 3. They yelled in unison, and they charged forward, weapons ready. The creature reeled back, confusion flickering in its glowing eyes. "Shoot there!" the stranger shrieked, pointing at the blinking monitor. "We have to break the code." James didn't hesitate. He squeezed the trigger, the sound deafening in the small room. The shot rang true, striking the device. Sparks flew as the screen erupted into a shower of flickering lights, casting shadows that danced wildly around them. "Now!" the stranger shouted, darting at the creature as it staggered, shaken by the unexpected attack. James followed suit, gripping the knife in one hand and the gun in the other, ready to take down the abomination that haunted the shadows. With surprising agility, they struck together, the creature now blinded by blinking lights and disorientation. As the knife found its mark, piercing through the tender flesh, the creature shrieked an otherworldly sound that echoed down the tunnel, vibrated through the grime of the station, and seemed to fracture the very air around them. Heart pounding, James didn't let up. He fired again, desperation fueling him. "We can't hold it back," he shouted, determination rising above the fear. "What else do we do?" The stranger glanced back at the monitor, which sputtered and flickered, chaos morphing into fractured numbers. "There has to be more. We can control it." James hesitated as the creature writhed, teeth gnashing, anger swelling. Time slowed as he felt a strange connection to the beast. The thought of controlling it both excited and terrified him. But instinct screamed that they had a chance. Then let us do it. With frantic movements, they both raced toward the monitor, fingers tapping madly on the keypad even as the creature gathered itself for one final charge. Unlock it. Do something. James urged, fear tightening his gut as the creature regained its footing. The stranger fought to hold his ground, eyes frantic. I'm trying. Shooting glances back and forth between the creature and the monitor, James felt the weight of the world pressing down on him. They had to act fast, or it would consume them. Just then, the monitor flared to life with a sequence of bright digits, forming a rapid pulse. That's it. The stranger shouted. Hit enter. James slammed his palm against the enter key. Instantly, the lights in the room flickered and surged, and a shockwave rippled through the ground. The creature halted, confusion spreading across its face. Its growl turned into an almost pitiful whine, echoing through the station. It's working. It's responding. The stranger exclaimed, eyes wide with disbelief. They had tapped into something, a control, a command that bent the beast to their will. James felt a powerful surge of triumph rush through him. Now! He yelled. We have to get out. In an instant, the creature lowered its massive head, the ferocity draining away, replaced with an unusual calm as if it now recognized their authority. Let us go. James shouted, pushing past the monster with urgency, his heart still racing. They darted back towards the entrance, fear barely bubbling beneath the surface as they slipped out of the office. We've got to warn them. They can't let this thing roam free. Ahead of them lay a narrow staircase leading to the street, the exit now bathed in moonlight, an inviting siren call. Hurry! James urged, racing up the stairs. They burst through the door, finding themselves once again in the cool night air, stars a stark contrast to the horrors they had just faced. We need to get the authorities involved, they can't shut this down. The stranger gasped, catching his breath, the adrenaline still flooding his veins. James felt a tumultuous mix of emotions: relief, fear, triumph, but mostly a profound understanding of the power they now held. They survived the nightmare, but a new sense of purpose anchored him. Together, we'll figure this out, he said, determination filling his voice. Whatever this thing is, we can't let it fall back into hands that would misuse it. The stranger met his gaze, and for the first time, a genuine smile broke through the corruption of their earlier fears. Together, he echoed, and with that promise, they began moving forward toward an uncertain but hopeful future. The city lay before them, now more than just a maze of shadows, but a place for uncovering the truth and building resilience against a system that had taken them both on a wild journey. As they stepped into the night, a powerful bond formed, a brotherhood of secrets and trust. This was just the beginning. Now, stay tuned, because there's more to come from this wild night. So, subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm, and flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about what happened. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support.